Looking back over this past week, what have been your primary life experiences? In other words, what has happened? And what are the feelings that went with these experiences, these events? And how did you experience God in the middle of what was happening, or maybe did not experience God in the middle of what was happening? Friday, I wrote out a list for myself of this past week. I'm not going to read that whole list to you, but just a couple of examples. There were 2 funerals and 2 very different situations. There was the bishop's letter last Sunday and his 2,000-word speech Sunday afternoon at the Right to Life meeting. Discussions about school, that marvelous science fair on Thursday night. No, the Super Bowl wasn't all that high on my list. But then under all of this, I was experiencing an uneasiness. Not about the Packers, but about the world, the church, God, myself. That's a big topic. And then I looked at the scriptures, which, as I said before, are very diversified, as my experiences and my feelings were from this end of the spectrum to the other, and I can't speak for where yours were at. And looking at Jonah, at first glance, it was very sad. This passage is oozing with pain, hurt, anxiety, perhaps depression. And I read a sentence in the book I'm going to read right now. It's a quote. In the face of great trials, a healthy option is simply to acknowledge how awful the situation is, and at the same time to trust that God will be with us in the darkness and in the pain, unquote. Then the letter of Paul to the Corinthians, and one line toward the end. Paul says, to the weak, I became weak to win over the weak. Now, part of our American culture is to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps. And that's got some value. But it's not what Paul's talking about here. Father Mike Shelby, who was in Chippewa a long time, would keep saying that God touches us primarily through our weaknesses, the areas where we feel empty, lost, not up to it. But that's where God seems to touch us. Now, Mark, the gospel, there's touching in more than one sense. Jesus grasped the hand of Peter's mother-in-law. How does she grasp our hand or our heart or put his arms around us? How is Jesus doing that? Because we need to take to heart Jesus' comfort. He healed the mother-in-law, and then the whole town came to him, and it says he went out to all of Galilee. There were so many demons to drive out. There were so many people who needed him. But let's come to Peter's mother-in-law for a moment. The Greek word for Jesus helping her up is the same Greek word that's used for Jesus' resurrection. That's very interesting. And the Greek word for where after she was up and going, where she waited on them or served them, is the same Greek word where Jesus describes his own mission of service, and that he expects that service of his followers. Same word. I find that very interesting. According to a talk I heard once, this is probably 12 years ago, Peter's mother-in-law is symbolic and represents the whole action of God healing us, God raising us, God lifting us up, that we can be church, that we can serve the people of God. Now, I take these readings, maybe I took these readings to this past week. I attempted to let them sink into my heart and soul, as I would hope you would. And then I move on to next week with these same readings, and yet look forward to the readings to next weekend. Allow Jesus to grasp you by the hand and to help you be raised up, as he did to Peter's mother-in-law, and allow that to happen every minute of the day. And if your past week has been one that's been absolutely marvelous, great. And then pray for somebody who's not in that situation. And pray for the day when you're going to need the patience, the bravery, the fortitude of Job. Because all this is for all of us at different times. Amen. Hallelujah. God bless.